יברכך אדוני וישמרך. יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקה. יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
And that is the Aaronic blessing being declared by Baruch Maoz and the late David Davis. The biblical mandate to pray for the peace of Jerusalem is then put into action to fulfill Isaiah 40, verse 1 and 2. Comfort, comfort my people. Right now is the most important time since the Holocaust to stand with Israel and to support the Jewish people and to provide them with comfort. My guest today sits in a very unique position to support Israel through the business world and in bringing Jews and Christians together in Australia through a ministry called SCAFI. John Lockwood is a businessman who began life in a family real estate business, which became a franchise. In the ensuing years, John has coached and spoken to leaders in many industries, including property, finance, retail, insurance, telecommunications, manufacturing, IT, and much more. He's the founding director of Kingdom Builders, which focuses on sharing kingdom principles in all spheres of our lives. John is the chairman of SCAFI, which is the Southern Cross Alliance for Israel, which gathers monthly with speakers from the Jewish and Christian communities to communicate and support in prayer and practical ways. Well, welcome, John, from Tasmania. Lovely to have you drop into Bendigo through technology and to talk with us on these important matters today.
Thank you, Ruth, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
So, John, though our focus today, we're going to be talking about the work with Israel, especially in this time of rising anti-Semitism. I understand the first link that you had with the Jewish community was actually while you were in real estate in Melbourne. Can you tell us about that early connection?
Yeah, well, I can. I'll tell it in by way of an experience that I had when I was at a later years asked by the rabbi of the Central Shul to come to the shul and to explain to all his people as to why I and a number of other individuals had come to love Israel. And he said, "You've got 5 minutes to do it, John." So I said, okay. And I got up and I said, well, many of you will remember that our firm, Blackburn and Lockwood, and in particular, my father had a great deal to do with the setting up of the suburb of Caulfield. In fact, after the Second World War, he sponsored a number of Jewish people to come to Australia to give them work, and he actually set up his major opposition by employing a man called Stanley Tobolowsky, who then, after a few years after the Second World War and working with my father, went to start his own firm in Toorak, Tobolowsky and Co., to later become Talbot and Company, and in these days it's called Talbot Diamond, which is one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the world at this stage. So father had a great deal of help in setting up a number of the Jewish people. When I came into the business as a youngster at 25 years of age, I worked in our corporate offices, and eventually we franchised. I made the decision to franchise the business, and we went from 12 corporate-owned offices to 45 franchised offices over a period of 3 years, which was a fairly large growth. And after about the second year, I called in all my franchisees and the staff, and I said to them, we are no longer going to do business with Jewish people. You can't trust them. Oh. They say one thing and then they'll try and renegotiate. They form communities to only one will bid at an auction. And I said, we're much to my father's chagrin, I would imagine, we're no longer going to do business. Some years later, I said to these people in the Central Shul, I found out that God has a sense of humour, because 20 years later, I was taken to Israel. I was on an ICCC conference, an International Christian Chamber of Commerce conference, and we'd done a tour, or started doing a tour before the conference started, and we were called by, at that time, the Australian ambassador to come to a place called Beersheba, where they were opening a park. So 14 of us left the major tour, went down to Beersheba, got out of the little bus. I was walking along, and I spied a fella from Melbourne, a fella called Dick Pratt, who I knew, who was a very big business person. I'd worked with. He's president of the Carlton Football Club. And I walked across and I said, "Dick, what are you doing here?" And he looked at me with great surprise and said, "John, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm at an International Christian Chamber of Commerce meeting coming up." He said, "I didn't know you were Christian, John." And I said, "I wasn't, Dick, when I was working with you." And I said, "What are you doing here, Dick?" He said, "Oh, we're giving the park to the mayor of Beersheba." So Pratt Industries had bought the land, renovated the land, and giving the park. And in fact, they were the hosts of the day's ceremony. And as we were talking, people were coming up, and I noticed cameras coming around, and Dick would lean across and he'd say, "John, meet Shimon Perez." "Oh, how do you do, Mr. Perez?" "Oh, nice to meet you." "Oh, John, and this is my friend Bibi Netanyahu." "Oh, how do you do, Mr. Netanyahu?" And within 2 or 3 minutes, we had photographers, cameramen, end up that next day on the front of Jerusalem Post, here am I with the president, the prime minister, the head of the trade, Dick Pratt and his wife, and John Lockwood, the official welcoming party to the opening of Beersheba Park. I said, God has a sense of humour. Has taken me from not doing business with Jews to learning for me to love Jews. And later on, I was accepted by many of the Jewish business people back into the fold as a son of the house because of all that happened from that. So that's a brief story.
And it's an amazing story, and I just love God's sense of humour, the way he gets us back on track. We're going to unpack these stories a little bit more in a moment, but we just love that Yeshua is the only light that shines in this dark world. And we're going to listen to a song that we recorded ourselves on Welcome King of Glory, Shalom Jerusalem.
Yeshua prayed we'd be one in peace. Yeshua prayed we'd be one in love. Yeshua prayed we'd be one in Him. Yeshua's blood has paid the price for peace. Yeshua prayed we'd be one in peace. Yeshua prayed we'd be one in love. Yeshua prayed we'd be one in Him. Yeshua's blood has paid the price for peace. Shalom, 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 shalom. Yeshua's blood has paid the price for peace. Shalom. Jerusalem, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, shalom, Jerusalem. Shalom, Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Shalom, Jerusalem.
My guest today is John Lockwood, and he is the president of SCAFI and is a businessman that's worked in Israel. And we've just been talking about John's introduction to Israel, the bad and then the good, and God's wonderful sense of humor in doing that. Israel, John, we know is a leading startup nation for businesses, a leader in technology and much else. And I know you've taken business delegations to Israel, and you've had many opportunities with the Israeli government, as you just alluded to us. Can you take that conversation a little further in working with Israeli businesses and the Israeli government?
Yes, sure. So following on from that conversation and that meeting, it then led to, when I came back to Australia, I was contacted by the then ambassador from Israel to Australia, Yuval Rotem, who rang me to tell me I have to meet with him. So he's been told he has to meet with me. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, what do you want? And I said, I really don't want anything, Yuval. Anyway, we arranged to meet in Canberra, and I said, how will I know, who you are? And he said, I'll send you a photo, John. Can you send me a photo of you so I know who you will? Because we officially hadn't met. So within a few minutes, an email came through, and I had sent an email with a photo of me standing next to the bronze horse that was unveiled at the Beersheba opening.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, he'll know me, he'll see that I've been to Beersheba, etc. Within a minute or two of me sending that came a photo of him standing on the opposite side of the horse.
Oh my goodness.
On the same day.
On the same day. So you'd been in the same place at the same time.
Correct.
That started. Isn't that a divine conversation? Isn't that a divine meeting?
Yes, it is. So that started a long conversation. He then introduced me to the president of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and the CEO. I started going into that, met a friend in there, Atan Drori, who was working as a consultant for Hebrew University, and who came to me and said, John, I think we need to start taking business people and young people, young leaders, potential leaders to the nation of Israel. So we organised our first business trip as Kingdom Builders, which I had founded, and we took our first group of 16 or 18, and the doors started to open. Hebrew University into their business section, Rothschild Centre. They have a business centre that takes plans and then puts them into actions and then floats them, then into hospitals, then into tech companies, then into... We just had this open ways of being brought into the highest of technology companies, from water, from energy, solar, and also because of the situation of my relationship with Yuval Rotem, he had set up with the Knesset that we would have straight through meetings with Foreign Office. And in fact, Yuval Rotem went back to be the head of the Foreign Office under Bibi Netanyahu and ran that for about 8 or 9 years. So every time we took a new business group, we would be met at the Foreign Office or the Parliament, meet with the parliamentarians, Knesset meetings, and all the different technologies. So we set up this relationship of bringing business people, both Christian and non-Christian, into the nation of Israel to see what they were doing, and which is quite remarkable.
It is. If people only knew what they do in terms of technology and business, it's extraordinary. And when you hear this BDS stuff, you go, do they really understand it would cripple our way of life if it was banned?
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, they lead the world in so many different ways. Per head, per capita, it is the largest startup nation in the world by far.
Yeah.
In numbers, United States is, but per capita for 6 million, or even if you include the Palestinian areas, etc., 8 million total in the nation of Israel, the amount of startups is just remarkable.
Phenomenal.
Until, of course, recently. Where
Oh, yes. Well, we'll get to the recent history. Yeah. So this relationship has been really important in where things are at today, isn't it? In terms of Christians standing with Israel as
Very much
the
so.
anti-Semitism is getting worse. How have you
very
found
much.
that?
Oh, look, it's we'll continue the story a little bit in by way of, from 2008-9 to 2018-19, before COVID hit, we were taking at least a group a year into Israel. We'd set up some startup companies here. We'd been into the north of Australia and were looking to help a lot of our Indigenous lands and peoples with agriculture, water, helping them develop their communities, build small business. Of course, that stopped when COVID hit because everything stopped around the world. But our relationship, and it led me into being invited to be the chairman of what was then called Christian Federation Australia, with a fellow called Peter Kentley, who was the CEO. And Peter had, on one occasion, been invited in to meet a couple of the Jewish rabbis. He'd invited me in, and we decided in 2017, I think it was, to do an event called Nations Blessing Israel in Melbourne. And the host was to be the rabbi of the Central Shul in Caulfield, Rabbi Isaac Reisenberg, so we started a relationship which was in the first place, it was a physical meeting. It had great support by both Christians and Jewish people. We were then going to do a couple more live events together until COVID hit. And that when COVID hit, the rabbi came to me and said, "John, we need to continue Christians and Jews standing together." So we started Southern Cross Alliance for Israel, which became a monthly Zoom event, which still goes on every month. And we get over 100 people coming in and probably 200 people outside watching it. And it's about bringing Jewish people and Christian people together, both, knowing who they are relationally, supporting business in both Israel and Christians who support Israel as a whole, and sharing ministries, if you like, from those who support Israel and the Jewish people. So it's the only, according to a few people, not much of this happens around the world where Jews and Christians have been seen to actually stand together, work together, share with each other, because we realized our moral value Christian heritage is from our Jewish friends and partners and brothers and sisters. And I think as we were going through that time, the Jewish people were also seeing the increase of anti-Semitism around the world, which of course has taken a dramatic hike in the last months and over the last 6 months in particular, or 5 months in particular, but certainly it was increasing beforehand. So it called us as SCAFI to gather ministries, Christian ministries like Christians for Israel and ICEJ and many, many, many others, including yours, to come together and say, hey, here we are, we're standing with our Jewish friends side by side, supporting each other, not just in words, but physically, so that we can help them physically as well as, just pray with them or for them, etc. So that's what's happened over this time period.
Amen. I want to come back to what SCAFI does in a moment, but I remember hearing Benjamin Netanyahu saying Christians are the best friends of Israel. And that
Yes.
I want to come back to that as well, because I think right now we're starting to see why that is so important. So while people ponder what John has shared thus far, we're going to listen to Karen Davis singing you only are my rock and my salvation. We know Jesus is the rock of our salvation. My guest today is John Lockwood, who is the chairman of SCAFI and a businessman working in Israel. And we were just discussing how Netanyahu sees the Christians as the best friends of Israel and the importance of this at this time as anti-Semitism rises in the world. John, you were just saying about bringing together the different ministries. And one of the things from our perspective is over these centuries, not centuries, decades that you've been talking about, that you've been doing in the business, we've been praying for this bringing together of Jews and Christians, because as a result of the Holocaust and the pogroms and all the rest of it, the Jewish people have been very hurt by the Christian community. And so that's been a very big prayer point that we've been involved in. So clearly the prayer and the practical things together are really important in regaining trust with Israel, but being able to stand with them at this time.
Absolutely. Very important. You know, it was interesting as we were taking business trips across of business people. When it came to Shabbat, we would often organise to take the group that we had into a rabbi's home to have Shabbat dinner with their family, which is for those who've never done one, all I can do is encourage you to say it's one of the most beautiful experiences that you will ever have. But it would always come during the night. The rabbi would come to us and say, is it all right if we say a prayer for you? And I would always say, yes, we would love you to say a prayer for us, on the condition that we get to have a prayer for you. Which took them back a bit. You know, they're not used to that. But the interesting thing that would always come up was, why do you love us? Why do you come here? Why do you support us? You know, what is it you want from us? And my answer would be always, we don't want anything. We're not here because we want something from you. We're here because within us, God has put a love for you that we can't explain in any other way than it comes from God. And that always, stop them in their tracks, if you like. Yep. And many a time we would have tears and they would thank us, etc., because the history between Christians and Jews, if you go back a few hundred years, has not been too good.
Absolutely.
Over the time period. But now that Netanyahu and many others from high rabbinical Orthodox Jewish people in this country and in Israel have come to realize that Christians who are called to stand and support Israel are the only ones that really love them and will stand with them regardless. And that is especially since October the 7th, as we've stood with them. We've gathered Christian groups, but here in Australia, we got 40 ministries, churches, supporters, organisations to write a letter to when the Labor Party were putting before their Labor Party meeting prior to going into office the proposition they were going to call Jerusalem and Judea Samaria occupied territories. Yeah. And that was to be legislated. So we said enough is enough. So we gathered 40 ministries, which represented over 200,000 people in Australia, and we delivered to Albanese, to Wong, to the Labor Party, and to every member of Parliament in Australia, a letter signed by these 40 ministries saying, we want you to know this is not right. We will stand against it. And anybody who puts this up as part of their policy for the future, just know the Christians who are standing for Israel will not be your friend as voters. And just so it didn't get through originally into the, but then I don't know, without going through the Labor Party, and we won't go through all the reasons why, but the Labor Party would seem not to be a friend of Israel at this particular point of time, from our perspective anyway.
Well,
and particularly the Greens, who are very anti-Semitic.
Well, since the massacre on October the 7th, that's become even more obvious, hasn't it? Just for our listeners, we were signatories to those letters, just to know that we are aligned with that and are standing on those aspects. And John, what you are saying you experienced has been our experience too, when we're talking to people on the streets, in the hotels. They say, why have you come from Australia, such a long way? Say, we love you, we're praying for you. And without exception, regardless of the age of the person, there's either a big smile or shock or even tears, saying, what? But you hate us. Everyone hates us. And I said, no, we love you. And we're praying for him. We're standing with you. And I've been saying recently, this could be very costly for us. And it's looking more and more that it will be costly for us as believers. But we won't go into that. So in terms of the SCAFI work here in Australia, this is bringing a lot of relationship between the Jewish community and Christian community in Australia, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And we can go into that now, or do you want to have another break?
No,
we can go straight in.
Yep, you go into that.
Okay. Well, during the COVID time, and towards we were coming to the end of the COVID time, there'd been a couple of changes with the ambassadorship from Israel to Australia, and a new ambassador was appointed, whose name is Amir Mammon. And when he first came here, October, I think it was 2 years ago, 2 and a bit years ago now, one of our Jewish friends in Sydney arranged for us to have a Zoom meeting to meet with him, as we'd met with other ambassadors. And so we had a meeting, and out of that meeting, he was invited to a couple of church meetings on the Gold Coast by one of our Christian for Israel friends, and he went to meet with these two churches. Anyway, about 2 weeks later, I had an opportunity to speak with him again one-on-one, and we had a Zoom together, and he said to me, John, you got to tell me something. He said, what do you carry that I haven't experienced before? And wow. I said, Emil, what are you talking, what's happened? And he said, well, I went to the church meetings with Matthew Chivers and Barry and Rogers, and he said, I've got to tell you, I have never felt such unconditional love.
Wow.
What is it? What is it that you have? So that has started a series of things that we have done with the ambassador around all the major cities, bar Adelaide, where we've done live events with him, with Christians at synagogues with the rabbis, and also at Christian churches, etc., where we've brought together people in a physical sense to hear, to share, to hear and support the people of Israel, to support the Jewish people, to learn much more about their ways. I've been personally blessed by the rabbi teaching on, the understanding of the Old Testaments from the Hebraic perspective, which brings new light into our Christian minds of how we've interpreted things. But the love that the ambassador has brought to both Christian and Jewish people has been quite remarkable. And I certainly believe that was the part of the purpose that he's been brought here, to be that catalyst of the Jews and the Christians coming together, which he has been a critical part of. So we've been blessed to do many events with him. We continue to have ongoing relationships and talks with him. And of course, he's actually been taken back to Israel, was with the Penny Wong recent trip, etc. He's a great diplomat. That's all I can tell you. He's a great diplomat.
Well, they have to be in that position.
They do. Much
That's
better
why-
than I would be.
I was going to say that's why some of us that have got the prophet anointing would not be a good diplomat.
Correct.
But I mean, this is just so powerful, isn't it? That this is something that God has been setting up for such a time as this, to position you for all these years, and now in just these divine appointments. Putting this together.
Yes, it's been remarkable how this has come together. And we may talk about the Jerusalem prayer breakfast.
Yes,
one thing that happened there.
We'll do that in a moment.
Which is quite funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll come back to that in a moment, because so we're going to listen to Paul Wilbur singing "Who Is Like Thee," speaking about the amazing God of Israel, the Holy One of Israel. Who is like him? There is none like him. My guest today is John Lockwood, who is the chairman of SCAFI and a businessman working with Israel. So just before COVID, Australia has now hosted 2 Jerusalem prayer breakfasts, which John and I have both had the privilege to attend. The first one was in Canberra. The second one was in 2023 at the Gold Coast. John, from your perspective, and you've just been speaking about the ambassador who was there at the last one, how significant have these 2 events been that Australia has hosted in bringing things together?
The answer is, of course, very significant. The first one, which was the groundbreaker in Canberra, was, after I actually attended the first Jerusalem prayer breakfast in Jerusalem. I think in 2017 or 18 was the first one there, and I was a guest at that. And we became friendly, particularly, and they asked us to host one in Australia, which happened in Canberra. We had a few Jewish people there. The Rabbi Glick was there, I think, and Rabbi Gutnick. But it was a sort of like the taster. And then, of course, we had COVID in the middle, and 2023, we were asked again to hold an event, which happened, as you said, on the Gold Coast. This time, it was a bigger event. We had more Jewish people coming. We had people from the Knesset come out as well to this event. And significant, the ambassador was there. A lot of our Christian and Indigenous friends have become part of that. And it's like bringing the relationships tighter and tighter together. There's more, and particularly, even though, this was before October, the event, we started from that Jerusalem prayer breakfast, more of the Christians coming on board, more support, and then particularly as we started doing events with the ambassador and traveling, it brought more and more people to know, to sit with, to meet their Jewish people in their own city, which doesn't happen that often. The rabbis hadn't often opened their doors beforehand, but now that trend has changed.
Praise
and wherever
God.
we've gone, we have been welcomed by the local rabbi and his synagogue to come, to learn, to share, whether it be Perth, whether it be Cairns, whether it be in Toowoomba or Sydney or Melbourne, etc. It's been quite the amazing time, if you like. So we've been blessed to be a part of that. And JPB is now something happening all around the world, these prayer breakfasts for Israel, and continues to grow in strength. And I'm hoping this year will continue to grow in strength as well.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, I noted in both the two in Australia, I think it was the week after the one in Canberra that we all went into lockdown. And straight
Yes.
after the one at the Gold Coast, within a month or so, was the
Yes.
big terror attack. And so it's really significant in this space, isn't it, to just
Yeah.
draw together, to take the strengths of each other and learn from each other, which is, what you're saying, because our perspective of the Bible is often very westernized and Greek thinking and very different to their perspective and from what even Jesus would have seen it as.
Yes, very, very much so. So I encourage anybody, if they get the opportunity to sit in on a couple of learning lessons with the local rabbis, go visit your local synagogue if you've got one, and
Yeah.
just say, hey, here I am. I'd like to, just learn more about. Can you share a little with us? And they're very happy to do so. So I encourage people, and there's plenty of online learning and teaching too. Our rabbi runs a fortnightly Friday morning session called Parsha Teachings, and happy for people to come on and join that if they wanted to as well.
So how could people join in with the SCAFI Zoom calls?
So just email. You've got to have your pencil out, or you might put this in the chat group, whatever. Southern Cross Alliance for Israel, one big long word, @gmail.com. Southern Cross Alliance for Israel @gmail.com. If you send us a note, we'll put you on the list. You'll get the invites for all that is happening and updates as we go, for monthly Zooms, for events in your city that may be happening, and indeed the Parsha teachings and lessons recordings you can go into. And right now, we're working with a group to hold events around the country under the banner of Never Again Is Now, which is NAIN. And people who are interested to find out about that can go to their website, neveraganisnow.org, and it will tell you about the people behind it, the events that are happening. February the 18th in Sydney will be a large event, walk, march, people standing for Israel. March the 4th in Adelaide is another one, and other events in major capital cities will be held, physical events that you can go stand with other Jews and Christians together to say never again, in essence, which is the Holocaust words that came, and now we're standing on those words with our Jewish friends and partners and brothers and sisters.
Amen. So there's some very practical things that people can do to put legs to the prayers, which is what John's talking about. John, I just wanted to go back now to the prayer breakfast. You said there was quite a humorous incident that took place with the ambassador.
Yes. So I was there, and I didn't want to, I spent some time with the ambassador, and of course, the ambassador has become friends with many of the heads of ICEJ and Christians for Israel, and all sorts of other people, etc., etc. And I had this Jewish lady come up to me and said, "What is it that you guys have got?" I said, "Pardon," and she introduced herself and where she was from, and I said, "What are you referring to?" She said, "Well, you Christians get the ambassador all the time, and we Jews find it really hard to get him. He won't come to our events, but he's always at your events."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this making the Jews jealous?
That is exactly what was happening. Exactly what was happening. And even in the embassy now in Canberra, we've got to get past Amir's guard, because Amir wants to come to all the Christian events because he said, "Oh, it's so open, John. I don't have to do anything. I can sing and I can dance, and I'm free as against going into the synagogue or to the business meeting."
Yep.
The expectations are much higher for him.
Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? But I love this making them jealous, as it says in Romans, that Paul said that's our role.
Yeah.
So when they ask that question, what is it about you guys? Do you ever get the chance to speak to them about Yeshua?
I've learnt in basic terms. I learned to put it in the way God has put a love in us that is beyond our own understanding to love you.
Yeah.
To love you physically, to love you spiritually,
Yeah.
to stand with you, to pray for you and with you when you would like that, etc.
Yeah.
We sit under the God who loves us and His Spirit who walks with us.
Yeah.
And I don't go into Yeshua, because they often say, well, we'll all be together when Yeshua returns. And I quip, yes, for the second time, and laugh.
Yes, yes, yeah, you'd have that, yeah.
Yeah. So again, I'm always sensitive, particularly with the Orthodox Jews and the religious Jews, that they can become offended with people who want to hit Jesus over the head with them, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience is by showing them that you love, telling them that you love them, telling them it's not because you have something you want from them, but something that the Father has placed in your heart. That is when they say, why? What do you have? What do you carry that I want?
Yeah.
And often I've had that even from rabbis. You carry something, tell me what it is. How do I get that?
Wow. It's called the light of Jesus. But yeah, we do have to be careful of how we have the conversation and who's called to. Like I've just had some contact with some evangelists in Israel. And since October the 7th, there is such an openness to the gospel of Jesus, of Jews actually wanting New Testaments, and really asking questions. And they even got opportunity to pray for people that were sick, and every one of them got healed. And so that opened up even more. So there's a real softness taking place, isn't there, in this space, but using wisdom.
Yes, and I think that's it. You've got to be guided by the Spirit and use wisdom in these things. Yes, I hear from many of the Messianics in Israel that there's been a want and a hunger. Even stories of Ghazians having visitations, hundreds having Jesus visitations, etc. So God is working through all of this and bringing people to Him. I don't purport to know how and what God is doing, or I sometimes go, "What are you doing, Lord?"
Yes. I think we've all asked that question. It's like, which scripture is applicable here in what's happening
exactly right.
in that. So, John, it's just been so lovely to talk to you today and to get your insight into the business world and with the government of Israel that has opened up. Is there any last thoughts that you'd just like to leave with the listeners as we wrap it up?
Look, this is what I have come to understand, and some of the Jews have come to understand when I have walked with them. They have realized that they are a light unto the nations. And we back that up and walking with them and talking with them. And in fact, I've been privileged to take and walk with them and bring business and technology into the nation of Burundi, the nation of Ethiopia, which is opening up even more, to other nations in the South Pacific, etc., etc. There's been a halt since October the 7th of many of the things that we were planning because, of course, Israel focuses on what they have to do day by day. And many of our friends are in the reserve or they have sons and daughters in the IDF or the reserve, etc. So we're meeting and praying with them and talking with them. Business will come back. I think Netanyahu said recently, they have to, as well as fight a war, they have to concentrate on the economy of their nation. because, that funds many of these things. So
Yes.
I'm sure there'll be more doors opening in this next 6 to 12 month period. And I know that I'll be going to Ethiopia with some people from Israel to the government. So stay tuned. There's lots going to happen.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, thank you, John, so much for sharing your insights and your experience and what the doors that God has literally opened up in this space as we stand together in either the prayer movement or the business world and the very practical ways of standing with Israel. So we're going to go out today with Paul Wilbur, Messianic worship leader, singing "These Are the Days of Elijah."